Wealth and power drives all the nations in the modern world, just as it did in the ancient times. The age of technological advancement has allowed us to measure the riches and even witness the most affluent empires and countries today. But back in the day, the capital city of the richest and most powerful Babylonian empire was a jewel that shone brighter in comparison to any other city of that time. But have you ever wondered how the richest and most influential city in the world looked in the ancient times? How did it rise to power when life wasn't as easy as it is in this era? And how did Babylon, the most prosperous and wealthy city that dominated the world for most of the time between the 19th and 6th centuries BC, eventually meet its demise? Ruled by Hammurabi, restored by Nebuchadnezzar, and then conquered by Cyrus, the city of Babylon is regarded as the heart of ancient Mesopotamia that was both loved and despised at the same time for being the center stage of the dawn of history. The Babylonian Empire often refers to either of the two separate empires in the Mesopotamian area in antiquity, of which Babylon was the capital. The two empires overpowered the region between the 19th and 15th centuries BC for the first time, and then between the 7th and 6th centuries BC for a second time. Built along the banks on both sides of the river Euphrates, the ancient city had many steep embankments that were built to contain the seasonal floods in the river. So exactly how old is the city of Babylon? According to records, the earliest known mention of Babylon appears on a clay tablet unearthed from the region of Sargon of Akkad of the Akkadian Empire. The tablet refers to Babylon as a small town. The site where the bustling, prestigious city once stood in all its glory currently lies just south of modern-day Baghdad. The last known record of the city dates back to the 10th century AD, in which it is called the small village of Babel. The land between two rivers, or Mesopotamia, birthed many of the first greatest cities of the world, and Babylon was probably the most commendable amongst them. Babylon was much more resilient than many other towns that popped up on the map and disappeared much sooner than they were supposed to. Historians are surprised by how many times the city managed to rise from its own ashes, even with new conquerors invading and taking charge of the region. A lot isn't known about the early history of Babylon, but according to ancient records, around 4,000 years ago, it functioned as an administrative center in the region. Later, in 1894 BC, it was conquered by Samu Abum, a chief from an area that now surrounds modern-day Syria. It is said that he turned Babylon into a petty kingdom. Historians have revealed that fortunes of the city dramatically changed in 1792 BC when the sixth king Hammurabi ascended the throne. Babylon became part of the smaller independent city-state when the First Babylonian Empire rose to power during the 19th century BC, which is now referred to as the Old Babylonian Empire. The Amorite king Hammurabi, who founded the short-lived empire in the 18th century BC, built Babylon into a major city, declaring himself its king. During his reign, Hammurabi expanded the city-state along the Euphrates and annexed several old urban centers like Uruk, Isin, and Larsa. Ruler of the mighty empire, he was revered as a god and established new rules for his people. The Code of Hammurabi that dates back to 1754 BC and consists of 282 laws. It is carved onto a 4-ton piece of basalt and is now on display at the Louvre Museum in Paris. This code contains many harsh punishments for breaking the laws, including removal of the tongue, hands, breasts, eyes, or ears of one who broke the law. Starting then, southern Mesopotamia became known as Babylonia, and the magnificent city dethroned Nippur as the region's holy city. Soon after, under Hammurabi's son Samsu-Iluna, the empire slowly withered, and Babylon spent long periods being ruled by the Assyrian, Kassite, and Elamite conquerors. The city was destroyed by the Assyrians, who later rebuilt it, and it eventually became the capital of the short-lived Neo-Babylonian Empire. This was a Neo-Assyrian successor state that existed between 609 to 539. The infamous Hanging Gardens of Babylon, ranked as one of the 7 wonders of the world, were also constructed during this era. This remarkable feat of engineering, with an ascending series of tiered gardens containing a vibrant collection of trees, shrubs, and vines, resembled a huge green mountain made of mud bricks. According to one legend, the Hanging Gardens were built alongside the Grand Palace, called the Marvel of Mankind, by King Nebuchadnezzar II. He apparently had it built for his Median wife, Queen Ametis, as she missed the green hills and valleys of her homeland. After the fall of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, Babylon was conquered by the Achaemenid, Seleucid, Parthian, Roman, and Sassanid empires respectively. Historians and archaeologists have estimated Babylon was the largest city in the world between 1770 to 1670 BC, and again between 612 to 320 BC. It was probably the first city in known history to reach a population above 200,000. According to estimates, the maximum extent of its area ranges from 890 to 900 hectares, or 2,200 acres. The name of the city derived from the native word Babylene, which means gate of the god. But in 1955, I.J. Geib argued that the original name of the city was Babila, and its meaning or origin were unknown. The remains of the city are located in present-day Iraq, almost 85 kilometers south of Baghdad. These remains include a large tell of broken mud brick buildings and a lot of debris. The site of Babylon also consists of a number of mounds that cover an area almost 2 by 1 kilometer, oriented north to south along the Euphrates. Back in the day, the river bisected the city, but over time, its course has shifted, so now most of the remains of the western part of the magnificent city of the past are inundated. Small portions of the city to the west of the river are also still standing. So far, only a small portion of the historic city has been excavated. The remains currently known to us include Qasr, the palace or castle, which is also the location of the Neo-Babylonian ziggurat Etemenarche, and Amar ibn Ali, the site or Isagila, a temple of Marduk, which also contained the shrines of Ea and Nabu. Besides that, Homera, a reddish mound to the west side having most of the Hellenistic remains, and Babel, a nearly 22 meters high mound sitting at the northern end of the site, holding a palace built by Nebuchadnezzar, have also been excavated. But before the modern excavation in Mesopotamia, the appearance of Babylon was mostly a mystery. The Western artists speculated that it was a hybrid between ancient Egypt, classical Greek, and contemporary Ottoman culture. It was considered one of the greatest cities in the world, and rightfully so, because more than 4,000 years ago, it had perfectly paved streets, several gates leading into the walled city, and more than 250 towers, most of which were at least 100 meters tall. This is the place where the art of modern writing and mathematics took birth. There were roads and drawbridges for efficient transport. The political importance paired with its favorable location rendered the city one of the main commercial and administrative centers in the world. But this wealth and prestige also made it a target for foreign conquerors. Along the Euphrates, especially in the neighborhood of Esagila, there were quays for trading vessels. The textual evidence suggesting that Babylon was an entrepot for trade with South Babylonia also points towards the existence of warehouses. The river was spanned by a bridge on brick lined with stone capping to the western half of the city. Streets in Babylon were laid out on a grid with the main axis running parallel to the river. From Esagila towards north past the paved processional way, the walls of which were adorned with enameled lions. Passing through the Ishtar Gate, decorated with enameled bulls and dragons, it led to the Akitu House, a little temple just outside the city that was reportedly visited by the Marduk annually at the New Year festival. Beyond the walls of the city, in the east, an outer rampart of triple construction met the Euphrates south and north of the city. Between the inner and outer defenses, there was irrigated land with a network of canals. The city has remained a vital part of the Judeo-Christian culture for many centuries now. The books of the Old Testament talk about the exile of the Jews to Babylon following the sacking of Jerusalem, by whose waters they sat down and wept. Outside the biblical tradition, the city also enticed the Greek and Roman writers who added to the vast store of legends about the ancient capital. Many popular tales speak about the mesmerizing structures in the city of Babylon, like the Tower of Babel. According to the timeline established by historians, Babylon was ruled by the Amorites between the 19th and 16th centuries BC, after which the Hittites conquered the city. Between the 16th and 11th centuries BC, the Kassites overpowered the city, but later on it fell in the hands of the Chaldeans and the Arameans, who struggled to maintain their control here. Between the 11th to 7th centuries BC, the Assyrian rule was ended by the Chaldeans, who flourished under Nebuchadnezzar II. The period spanning the 7th and 6th century BCE is considered the golden age of Babylon, where the city thrived under the Khalid rule until it was ended by the Persian king Cyrus the Great in 539 BC. After that, the Macedonians, Seleucid, and Sasanians controlled Babylon until the Muslims arrived. No wonder the excavations undertaken by Robert Koldewey, a German archaeologist, established that the city had been built and rebuilt several times. Experts now opine that it would be better to view the city as not one Babylon, but as several Babylons that are a product of the traditions built over thousands of years by its consistently changing rulers. The Babylonians themselves were pretty aware of the importance of their civilization. During the Golden Age, Nebuchadnezzar used the wealth he had accumulated from other lands to rebuild and re-glorify Babylon. He was the one who completely strengthened the city's defenses by digging a moat and building new city walls. Beautifying the city was also his aim. That's why the processional way was paved with limestone, temples were renovated and reconstructed, and the magnificent Ishtar Gate was also erected during his ruling years. The gate was made from glazed cobalt blue bricks, and it features an inscription attributed to Nebuchadnezzar which says, "I placed wild bulls and ferocious dragons in the gateways, and thus adorned them with luxurious splendor, so that people might gaze on them in wonder." For the Babylonians, their city was no less than a paradise. It was the center of the world and a symbol of cosmic harmony that came into being when the supreme god Marduk defeated the forces of chaos according to their beliefs. The fall of Babylon denotes the end of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, after which it fell into the hands of the Achaemenid Empire in 539 BC. This marked the end of the golden era of the city, and in the coming centuries, the conditions only deteriorated until it was completely abandoned. Nabonidus, the son of an Assyrian priestess, Adagupi, had overthrown the young king Labashi Marduk in 556 BC. For many years, Nabonidus entrusted his son, prince and co-regent Belshazzar to rule. He was considered a capable soldier but a poor politician. This made him unpopular with the subjects. The Achaemenid Empire had been growing in strength to the east particularly, but their days of power were cut short by Cyrus the Great, who entered Babylon after the Battle of Opis and incorporated Babylonia into the Persian Achaemenid realm as a satrapy. Cyrus vowed to respect the people and allowed the incarcerated to return to their homeland. This improved his image, and he was soon considered the legitimate successor of the ancient Babylonian kings. He actually became more popular than Nabonidus. During the Hellenistic period, the last Achaemenid king of the Persian Empire was defeated by the ancient Macedonian ruler Alexander the Great at the Battle of Gaugamela. And under Alexander's rule, the city flourished as a center of learning and commerce, but following his death in 323 BC, his generals, the Diadochi, divided the empire among themselves. This led to decades of fighting and unrest in the region. The constant turmoil led to a virtual emptying of the city of Babylon. A tablet from 275 BC stated that the residents were transported to Seleucia, where a palace and temple of Esagila were constructed. This deportation diminished Babylon's importance as a city, though almost a century later sacrifices were still performed in the old sanctuary of Babylon. It has long been speculated that the foundation of Seleucia diverted the population to a new capital of Babylonia, and that the old city ruins became a quarry for the builders of the new government. However, the new publications detailing the Hellenistic period claim that urban life was pretty much the same well into the Parthian Age. Under the Parthian and Sassanid empires, Babylon remained a province of the Persian governments for 9 long centuries until after AD 650. It was also briefly captured by Trajan in AD 116 to be a part of the newly conquered province of Mesopotamia. His successor Hadrian, however, relinquished his conquests east of the Euphrates River. And despite all the instability and turmoil, Babylon maintained its own culture and people. The residents spoke varieties of Aramaic and continued to call their homeland Babylon. In the mid-7th century AD, Mesopotamia was invaded by the ever-expanding Muslim Empire, who opened the gates to a period of Islamization in the region. Babylon was dissolved as a province under their rule, and the Aramaic and Church of the East were eventually marginalized. Arab scholar Al-Qazwini described Babylon as a small village. Al-Qazwini also wrote about the dungeon of Daniel that was visited by the Christians and Jews during the holidays, while the graveshrine of Amran ibn Ali was visited by the Muslims. Medieval Arab writings refer to Babylon as the source of bricks that were used in cities from Baghdad to Basra. From historic analysis, it is quite clear that after Alexander's death, Babylon steadily fell into ruin and was eventually forgotten and abandoned. In many cases, the European travelers failed to locate the city and mistook Fallujah for it. It wasn't until the 18th century AD that travelers began flocking to Babylon again. In 1905, several villages were present in Babylon, one of which was the Quaresh, with around 200 households located inside the boundaries of the ancient inner city walls. This village grew because of the increasing need of laborers during the German Oriental Society excavations. Since the creation of the modern Iraqi state, the site of Babylon has been a cultural asset. It was officially protected and excavated by the Kingdom of Iraq under the British administration. It later became the Hashemite Kingdom of Iraq. In February 1978, the Ba'athist government of Iraq under Saddam Hussein initiated the Archaeological Restoration of Babylon project, under which they reconstructed the features of this ancient jewel on top of its own ruins. After the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the area surrounding Babylon came under the control of US troops, who later handed it over to Polish forces in September 2003. In May of 2009, the provincial government of Babil reopened the site to tourists, and more than 35,000 people visited the ancient city in 2017. The site of Babylon was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in July 2019. The State Board of Antiquities and Heritage is mainly responsible for the conservation and protection of the archaeological site. They are aided by the Antiquity and Heritage Police and the World Monuments Fund.